Welcome guys to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today the long expected review that I always wanted to do, the Focusrite Scarlett Solo, a pretty popular interface that a lot of people seem to be using, but I never got around to it. I still mostly use my old Firewire interface, but I really wanted to test this one, so that's why I have it here for you today. And those interfaces, actually there's a bigger version as well, where you can connect studio monitors to. This is the smaller version, probably more suitable for your standard desktop speakers. So for me, that's enough. And if you're familiar with my channel and have watched a few other videos, maybe you know already, or you do know already, I'm always have the introductory part, the unboxing part, where I show you through close-up shots, and then the sound test part. And today, what I was planning was for the sound test part to give you a little bit of a comparison, how different microphones sound when we connect it to the Focusrite USB interface. And the first mic that I'm going to test is this dynamic XLR mic, the Shure SM58. Very popular mic. I'm using this for a long time. And then I have a brand new AKG D5. Shure has a cardioid pickup pattern. The AKG has a supercardioid. And then I even have a very budget-friendly condenser microphone, the BM700. I think it's sold under different brand names, but I think it's good to test because, let me quickly give you a close-up shot. Usually the dynamic mics, they need a little bit more, the input gain needs to really be a little bit higher, but this needs the 48 volt phantom power, so we can test this as well. See, up in front here we have the 48 volt phantom power switch. So I'm gonna test two dynamic mics and a phantom powered mic with this interface. Overall, it looks very promising. We're going to connect it here, and then I'm also going to do some listening tests and share this my conclusion with you in the last part of the video. And guys, I also researched what kind of analog to digital converter chips are in here, so maybe I sprinkle in some of my research information along the way. Guys, awesome for tuning in. Without further ado, without drawing this out too long, why don't we just get rolling with the unboxing? I'll show you for close-up shots, and then we can jump to the sound test. You can always use the navigation in the video description below. Guys, awesome you're here. Let's get rolling. Now guys, I'm very excited to finally have a look at the Focusrite Scarlett Solo USB audio interface. And as you can see here, the interface has 24 bits, 192 kilohertz. It comes with a bunch of software accessories, the Ableton Live software, I believe. That's something I used in the past. Those other particular ones I'm not so familiar with. And with the Ableton Live, I also know it's like, I think 2 guys from Berlin made this. So I think the company has German founders. And back in the day, they used to make this improv music, and that's what the Ableton was centered around. So a little bit interesting sometimes to read about these software company histories, but I digress already. So let's quickly jump to the unboxing. We find the interface itself and a USB cable. So that's pretty basic. That's all you need to get started. And taking this out of the box here real quick and also getting a little bit closer, you get a good impression of how this interface looks. So you have the XLR input, you have a line and instrument. So that's also something you might want to notice, that not every interface that I saw has the ability that you can switch between line level and instrument level. And from what I've read in the manual, obviously if you switch it to instrument, the input is meant to be used for a guitar. And basically it's an unbalanced connection. So if you want to use a line level signal, you switch it over here, it becomes a balanced connection, the TRS tip ring sleeve. So if you're not familiar with XLR cables or TRS cables, you might also want to look this up, maybe quickly do a Google search and familiarize yourself with these different types of cables. I know especially when you have mixing consoles, then sometimes you also have inserts and stuff like that. So you want to be a little bit familiar with how you wire your audio gear. Not that you at some point in the future maybe wire something incorrectly. That would be not so good. But obviously instrument line level, that's pretty straightforward. 48 volt phantom power. And yeah, I mean, guys, look how this looks. I mean, this is so shiny. It has like this insane glowing red color. So I think this looks pretty cool. And like I mentioned in the beginning, just make sure that when you pick the Focusrite that you not accidentally buy one with the wrong outputs. This one is obviously the one with cinch, so that's great for stereo systems or just your computer speakers, as opposed to when you buy another model that has the TRS outputs. Then not everybody has studio monitors, so it's not for everybody to buy an interface with the TRS outputs. Because let's say you have the TRS outputs here, then the only way to connect your computer would be the headphone jack. So just do a little bit of planning and look at both the inputs and the outputs when you're making a purchase. Otherwise, from the size, if I take like a credit card, the Focusrite Scarlett Solo is very, very compact. So if you like to do a lot of traveling, maybe a small interface like that is kind of useful. I saw other interfaces like the Steinberg that was a little bit bigger. So if size is a consideration, this is a very compact interface. And because I did already a little bit of research, I also know that these interfaces, basically what they do, they take the USB signal, and then there is a motherboard in here, like a small PCB with a processor and an analog to digital converter and a bunch of other components. So maybe what I'm thinking gonna do is make a dedicated series where I disassemble some of the USB audio interfaces and show you what actual converter chips are in here, because that, to my knowledge, is not written anywhere here on the package. So you don't know what converter chip is in here. And obviously the converter chip and the board layout also has an effect on the way the interface sounds. And I looked this up. I think I know what kind of processor and analog to digital and digital to analog converter is in here. So that's something for another video, but I just wanted to mention this. So depending on how interested you are, you can really learn a lot about this audio stuff. But since this is a starter interface, I'm not going to dive into deep with this in this video. So this concludes the unboxing. Let's jump to the most interesting part 3, do the sound test. That's what you came for here to do. And yeah, that's what the navigation is also for. Guys, awesome you're here. Let's do a listening test. Now, like promised, we jump to sound test part 3A, and I connected a test microphone to the Focusrite USB interface. And as you can see, that's a really nice handy setup for podcasting or live streaming. And I am using currently the Shure SM58, which is a really classic microphone. It's a very popular, very widespread microphone that's widely used, and I'm personally having this in my setups for lots of years now, and it works really, really nicely. However, as you may notice on the Focusrite, I turned the input gain all the way up, and sometimes I noticed when I'm using the Shure directly connected, excuse me guys, I had to drink a little bit of water. I'm talking a lot, so that puts a little bit of a strain on my voice. When I connected this microphone directly to USB devices, sound cards, sometimes the preamps are not that strong as I would like them to be, simply because the Shure SM58 needs a little bit more power from the preamp. So you can always consider, if you're in that case that your sound card doesn't give you enough power that you want, you can always put, and that's the nice thing about these XLR mics, you can put, for example, a tube preamp in between the signal paths. So you would have the microphone, tube preamp, and then the Focusrite or some other sound card of your choosing. So that's the nice thing about XLR. But guys, I digress a little bit. Why don't we jump to the next mic? Sound test part 3B, the AKG with the supercardioid pattern. The Shure is the cardioid. So let's jump over to the next microphone. Let's get started. Awesome guys, now we jumped to part 3B, and we're going to continue our test of the Focusrite USB interface. This time with the AKG D5, which has a little bit of a special Varimotion limited diaphragm. So the diaphragm in here has supposedly a little bit of a different design, which AKG also patented. So that's part of the product differentiation that the manufacturers usually use. And maybe the sound difference is not that huge. Maybe it's just nuances. But hey, that's why I'm testing this for you guys right here. So I don't want to draw this out too long. As you can see, the input volume peaked there right a little bit, but I turned it all the way up. So if I talk with too loud of a voice, I also got to be a little bit careful, but keep a little bit of a distance. And guys, let's jump to sound test part 3C and also test the condenser mic, because I'm already predicting when I disconnect this and put in the condenser mic, that it's not going to be, I will not have to turn the input gain up that high, because the condenser mics usually are more sensitive. So let's jump to sound test part 3C. Excellent, guys, we are almost finished with the sound test part of the Focusrite USB audio interface review. Like I told you in the introductory part, obviously I'm also going to use this for a while, do some listening tests and tell you how I think the music sounds when listening to audio recordings. And yeah, right now we are testing a Tonor BM700. I also told you that the BM700 is sold on a different brand name, so don't be surprised if you see it under a different brand name. This is really one of the cheapest or most affordable condenser microphones that I could find. As you can see, the red indicator light, I pushed the button in and the red indicator light started to glow. That shows you that the 48 volt phantom power is on, and I turned the input volume on. Let me guess, I can't really see that very well from that angle here, but I think it's at the 1 o'clock position, so there would be quite some room to make it more sensitive. Although I have to say, if I would now go further away, the sound characteristics would change, even though I could raise the volume level, the input level, because the condenser mic would pick up more sounds from the surroundings. So room acoustics, distance to your microphone, the microphone itself, the audio interface, those are all things that affect your sound. So take these tests with a grain of salt, but at least they give you a rough indication, and you have seen 3 different mics, so that's rather useful. Awesome, guys, for tuning in. Next up, we're going to jump to the summary and conclusion part. I'm going to listen to the footage and tell you my conclusion and give you all the important information that you need when choosing a USB audio interface. So let's jump to part 4. Yeah, excellent, guys. This already concludes the test of the Focusrite Scarlett Solo USB audio interface. That should be good for podcasting and live streaming. And what I found out so far is how different microphones sound when connecting them to this USB audio interface. And guys, what you didn't see, I also did a couple of days of listening tests. And yeah, you always want to make sure you have the right XLR cables handy when you want to start recording. And also audio-wise, like I told you, it has this cinch output at the back, so it's not the TRS connectors. So that's something you want to be mindful of when shopping for an audio interface, which one you need. And I personally, losing a little bit of focus right now, used this cable to go out of the interface into my speakers, but that can vary depending on your setup. And yeah, in this test you have seen how surprisingly well this USB audio interface works when connecting different microphones. I've tested a total of 3 microphones and they sounded each a little different. First up, we did a test listen to the Shure SM58, a staple microphone, very common. And what I found is that on the positive side, it sounded really nice and warm. A little bit on the negative side, the SM58 probably needs a little bit of a stronger preamp. So the signal that I got out of the SM58 was not as strong as compared, for example, to the AKG.min. The AKG.min was giving me a stronger signal into the interface. So that sounded also maybe not as warm, but had a little bit more clarity. So warm sound, a little bit lower input signal, a little bit higher input signal, neutral sound. And then lastly, here I think I made a little bit of a mistake with the Tonor BM700. This is by far the cheapest microphone that I could find, or I have lying around for testing right now. The mistake was, I think I talked into the back, which supposedly this is the front. So I kind of missed that. But regardless whether you talk in the back or front, I found that the Tonor BM700 sounded a little bit thin, but I think that's more due to the microphone than actually the interface itself. And guys, I did listening tests, and what I found listening to music for a couple of days is the interface seems to be an all-rounder interface that sounded surprisingly good. And what I did, I tested different input levels, because I also tested another interface, the Steinberg, which is all UR12, the Steinberg UR12, which is approximately in the same range, price range in the Focusrite Solo. And with the Steinberg, it was like, if I left it on the middle, the sound was a little bit thinner, And as when I turned it all the way up, I feel it had more bass to it. So this effect wasn't nearly as pronounced with the Focusrite. Here I think it sounded pretty similar no matter where I turned the dial. But maybe that's also due to my speakers, guys. So that's not the absolute test. You might want to experiment with that as well, where you turn the volume knob. And also a good thing about the Focusrite is this switch here, where you can switch between line level and instrument level. That's something that Steinberg also didn't have. But if you want to know more about that, then watch my comparison video about these two interfaces. Obviously, only if you want, that is, it's an option. And the reason why I point this out is that the Focusrite has the Cirrus Logic chip. I think you can see the model number here. And the Steinberg actually has the same analog to digital converter. And basically how this works is that inside all these interfaces, no matter which brand you choose, usually the USB signal goes to a processor, and I think the Focusrite uses the XMOS, and then it goes from the processor, the XMOS processor, to the Cirrus Logic, and the Cirrus Logic does both digital to analog as well as analog to digital. So it may interest you that sometimes the interfaces can have the same analog to digital converter and still they can sound different simply because of the way the circuit board is designed and what components they put on the circuit board. So that goes to show that even with the same analog to digital converter, you can still have slightly different sound results. They might not be that super massive, but nonetheless. Guys, before I digress any further, I invite you to head over to my channel page. I showed this to you here in the audio section. There you can find a bunch of other reviews about lavalier mics, about other interfaces, about USB mics, XLR mics, you name it. And I'm sure you can learn something new in my videos, just as a lot of other people have already done. And I wish you a lot of fun with your new gear, no matter which gear you choose. And excellent for tuning in. I see you as a subscriber, and in the next video, all the best to you. Take care. And because you just watched my review of the Focusrite Scarlett Solo, you might also be interested in comparing it, for example, against this silver Steinberg interface, which I reviewed recently, which both interfaces, I think they have a similar analog to digital converter in there, so that might be kind of interesting for you to compare the sound of those. I see you as a subscriber, and in the next video, have fun with your new gear. Take care.